Hi, my name is Lindsay Pasha. I work for Cornell Cooperative Extension's Harvest New York team. Today, this webinar is on how to determine pricing for your agricultural products. I always like to start out talking about the 4 Ps of marketing. Some people say 5. They are price, product, promotion, place, and then we're talking about 5 Ps. It would be people. So when it comes down to marketing, price is very important. That's why we're doing this webinar today. So when we look at price, we need to look at, does it cover your costs plus pay yourself? So labor is a key component of determining what you should be charging for your agricultural product. Is the price reasonable for your market? And then what will your customer pay? And I like to use an example. So I'm located in Northern New York. When I talk about, is this reasonable for your market? We've in Northern New York, we've had farmers drive from all the way from Northern New York down to New York City to find a market for their agricultural products because the local market wasn't large enough. They weren't willing to pay the prices that they needed to sustain their business. So it's important to look at a big picture of where you might be able to sell your products to if your local market isn't going to sustain your operation. How to figure out pricing. So it's important to compare current market prices when you're looking at figuring out pricing. This going to the grocery stores, newspapers, your farmers markets, looking at different vendors, what they're charging, potential market reports that you might find online. There's not technically, like I say, for an operation that this is how you should do it. There's just different options, but it really is important to look at your operation in regards to an enterprise budget. And an enterprise budget is all the costs associated with producing that agricultural product. So when you're looking at your enterprise budget, you're looking at your fixed costs versus your variable costs. So people ask me, what's a fixed cost? What's a variable cost? So fixed costs are expenses that do not change with increasing or decreasing of your products or your sales. So examples would be like your tractor, your high tunnel, etc. And we'll get into a couple more of these on the next couple slides. And your variable expenses are things that change that may increase or decrease depending on your production or your sales. So that's how many seeds you're going to be putting in, how many sprays you might need during the season, how much fertilizer application. But the other thing that's really important that I want to stress upon is labor is a key component of an enterprise budget. This is important because you need to, if you ever get sick, get injured, you're going to possibly need to hire somebody. So it's important to have this already put into your enterprise budget, what your labor is, especially, if you're just a sole operation that you're doing all the work, having that in, like, as I mentioned, if you're sick, if you get injured, somebody to pay somebody, but also all the labor, if you have multiple employees, to actually know what that overall cost to produce those products will be. People ask, well, how do you determine keeping track of your expenses to create an enterprise budget? There's many different ways. Some people use Excel, some people use QuickBooks. I have an agricultural operation firm that I have myself. I throw all my stuff in a folder and I figure out all my expenses at the end of the year, just like when I do my taxes. So you can do the same thing with your enterprise budget, because maybe there's a high or a low in your year where you can focus on creating an enterprise budget, just like you would be collecting all your expenses to pay, to figure out your taxes for your operation. You want to be able to track your production, so how much is produced in your field, but also if you have livestock, how much meat you might be getting if you're selling selling meat products. And this also will help determine potential profitability for your operation. So that's what an enterprise budget does, is it helps you determine how much you're actually your overall expenses would be, like specifically for individual commodities, but it also will help to determine like what your potential profit could be for your operation. I do want to stress that it is okay to make assumptions when creating an enterprise budget. You know, it's important, like I said, to track your labor, but you might forget to track your labor 1 week or for a couple weeks. So, you know, you could give an overall estimate of how much labor might be it takes for a certain task on the farm. And it's also important to update your enterprise budget. And, you know, ideally it would be nice to be able to update it every single year. You might not have time, but every couple of years, because as we know, things are going to go up in price. So it's really important to have those actual costs in your enterprise budget. So we're going to next look at an enterprise budget that was put together by Penn State. So there's a lot of different enterprise budgets that you can find out there. There's ones that you can find like on the internet through a search, through different land-grant universities. You know, within Cornell, we have a number of enterprise budgets that have been created. And there's also like a lot of agricultural books that you might have through possibly a business section that has enterprise budgets. They're all different. You know, the ideal behind an enterprise budget is you need to tailor it towards your operation. So it's really important, you know, to kind of look at different enterprise budgets that are out there and what's going to work. This one, for example, that comes from Penn State is actually a fillable one. So, you know, like I mentioned before, we know that costs are going to change from year to year. So this allows you to actually put in, like, this gives an example of like, it says receipts, the quantity, and then you can put in like this, for this operation, they had 100 receipts. You can do the same thing. You see 100, you know, how many receipts, the price that your price, and then be able to get a calculation of how much your potential revenue may be for your farm. And like I mentioned before, there's a section of variable costs. So variable right here on the left, the fixed costs are over here on the right. The variable cost goes into all of, you know, like your different fertilizers, your herbicides, your fungicides, insecticides, your planting. As I mentioned before, how labor is important, all of your labor. So this operation enterprise budget is for a fresh market apple production budget. So there's budgets that are tailored for a specific commodity. And, you know, this one has all of the labor for the trellis maintenance, the pest scouting, the thinning, other seasonal things that might need to be done, pruning, your harvesting, other things that need to be thought about too within an enterprise budget is like your marketing and your sales. And then usually what's nice about an enterprise budget, especially in a lot of these fillable ones, is they usually have others that you can add in for your operation. As you can see, repair and maintenance, that's a variable cost, because some years you might need, you know, repair and maintenance on the tractor or other equipment, and some you might not. And then you look at your fixed costs would be like your tractor, your equipment, your land charge, which technically could be variable because it might change from year to year. But it is something that you're going to need to, you might need to be considering that it's going to be from, might be a signed contract that would be from for the next 10 years, and you know what that actual cost is be. So then that would make it fixed. What's nice about this is you can see your total variable cost for your operation, the total fixed, and then can see your returns over variable cost, returns over total cost. So it can give you an idea of how much your potential, how much you're actually going to be making in your operation. I want to actually talk about a little bit about if you're going to do value added products. So this is what I use for my operation. So I make about around 20 different products, from like body butters to soaps to lip balms, bath salts. And I do this one of these pages in Excel per product. I do have them printed off so I can make like handwritten adjustments because I definitely like paper and pencil sometimes more than using a computer. So I created this for my operation. So it has like the ingredients, the amounts I need, my purchase location. And usually the purchase location, I do the full price, and then I figure out what the actual cost per amount is. And then I make usually a line on here that says my labor hours to make the product, my, any other containers, labels, packaging. And then I figure out my total cost to make. And then what I'm willing to put as a price for retail and wholesale. And so when I determine my retail and wholesale price, I usually look at a number of different operations that are similar. So I have an online store, so I look at very similar online operations. And then when I'm looking at potentially selling into the farm stand, I look at like at the farmers markets and see what they're potentially selling similar products to. And this was just an example of that I put together quickly on making a 9-inch apple pie to crust. And so I have my ingredients, the amounts needed, my purchase locations, like how big the bag was and the full price on it. And that includes like if there was something, like on the containers or so that it would have the tax included. And then I figure it exactly down to cost per amount. I don't have an exact labor hours of how long it would take me to do this, but I just made a little line that says labor hours, $20 per hour. And then I have my containers. My label I use as an assumption because I know my labels are usually about 10 cents per label. And then I put in my total cost to make it was $5.06. That's without, remember, the labor hours. I didn't put that number in this one. And then what I did was I did a comparison between other operations. So I did other operations. The 1550 was like a local farm stand. And then the other operations was like a grocery store at $7.98. And then I have a line there to figure out what I'm willing to charge for retail or for wholesale. So I'm just going to show you a couple different resources that are out there. So this is an enterprise budget that comes from California. So this is from UC Cooperative Extension. And I like to show this one this is like a full-on profitability calculator. And I think it's a wonderful resource because it has a lot of different broken up sections in this Excel spreadsheet for an operation. It has your labor overhead, all the things that you need to consider when it comes down to your wages, housing, insurance, your cash overhead. So that's like the tractor fuel, vehicle fuel, and all of this. What's nice about this cost calculator is it's all entwined together so that the pages they talk to each other so that it can help you with the calculations. Capital purchase depreciation, which is really important to know, like, on a barn or your farm stand, your working housing, like the actual lifespan behind this. A lot of this is when you're figuring out your taxes. Your accountant would use this for depreciation, but it's important to also figure out into your enterprise budget. And then you've got like a main page for your information on your product, and then your income for your different places that you might be selling, a section for describing your farm. So this is this is an actual like a vegetable crop production one. So it has like your bed length, your total crop volumes, your annual sales parameters. And it even gets down to like your different crops that you're going to be doing. Like specifically, it gets into like the bed length behind them, the labor that you might need, the time that you're spending, like mixing potting mix, mowing. And this is a great resource in which you can take a lot of this information and put it into your enterprise budget. So you're not creating things from just scratch. And then this right now here is from Penn State University. And this one is for field grown and season extension budgets. So that would be season extension would be in your high tunnels. These are specific ones. So, you know, as we know from growing different crops out there, field versus high tunnel is going to be a little bit different when it comes down to expenses to consider, especially like the bed lengths, any additional like heating you might be using, row covers. So these have specific ones based on the different crops. So onions, peppers, strawberries, winter squash, and then it goes into the high tunnel for very similar products. So cucumbers, peppers, and then tomatoes. Another thing that I put together a number of years ago was the cost to build a facility. So we put one together specifically in regards to starting a winery in Northern New York. And this is located on the Harvest New York website. And in this, it has like an actual PDF of like the project. And then there is an Excel spreadsheet that has two different kind of filters with it. One is on like the equipment that you'd be using. So if you were going to start like a dairy processing facility or something similar, this would give you like at least an idea of like what potentially you could use as a template when you think about like equipment, like all the stainless steel tanks. If you're going to use this to start a winery, just remember that this was before 2020. So as we know, like a lot of our different stainless steel tanks, barrels, all the equipment out there is going to have gone up. So it gets into filtration systems. You might need bottles, like buying by the case, by the pallet, lab equipment that you might need, and like additional things to think about, like your licensing for your operation, property taxes, your markets. And then there's a field on here that looks specifically at if you wanted to figure out like yield per acre or yield per vine, you could potentially figure out how many gallons would be produced, how many bottles, total bottles, and then it would give you an idea of like what size tank you would need for your operation. And you know, if you need anything, please feel free to reach out to me. My name is Lindsay Pascio again. My email address is lap67@cornell.edu. I'd be happy to help you with any questions that you might have in regards to figuring out pricing.